I'll be resigning from office with my last day being January 5th, 2026, and I look forward to seeing many of you again sometime in the future. May God bless you all, and may God bless America.
¿Qué tal, amigos? Hoy sábado 22 de noviembre de este año 2025. Lo que le acaba de pasar al Partido Republicano, señores, es un golpe demencial. Marjorie Taylor Greene. Hablamos de la figura MAGA que para muchos parecía intocable. De la mujer más conspiradora en este partido. Acaba de anunciar oficialmente que renuncia a su cargo en el Congreso. Así es, amigos. Publicó una carta por escrito y sacó un video, afirmando que su último día será el 5 de enero del año 2026. Como les dije, lo acompañó con un video donde básicamente se está comparando como una esposa maltratada, pero no por cualquiera, sino que por Donald Trump. Así es, amigos. Para que puedan entender un poco el tono del anuncio, voy a mostrarles el primer fragmento del video donde pues ella se publica su renuncia, ¿no? Veamos esto.
I'll be resigning from office with my last day being January 5th, 2026, and I look forward to seeing many of you again sometime in the future. May God bless you all, and may God bless America.
Y bueno, claramente no es todo, ¿no? Porque en el mismo video ella explica lo que según es el verdadero motivo por el cual se está largando de este lugar. Culpa directamente a Donald Trump, culpa a MAGA Mike Johnson y aprovechó para lanzar una ráfaga de críticas en contra de todo el Partido Republicano. Escuchen este otro pedazo de clip porque ahí es donde empieza a tirar fuego con todo. Vean esto.
I have too much self-respect and dignity. I love my family way too much, and I do not want my sweet district to have to endure a hurtful and hateful primary against me by the president that we all fought for, only to fight and win my election while Republicans will likely lose the midterms, and in turn be expected to defend the president against impeachment after he hatefully dumped tens of millions of dollars against me and tried to destroy me. It's all so absurd and completely unserious. I refuse to be a battered wife, hoping it all goes away and gets better. If I am cast aside by the president and the MAGA political machine and replaced by neocons, big pharma, big tech, military-industrial war complex, foreign leaders, and the elite donor class that can never, ever relate to real Americans, then many common Americans have been cast aside and replaced as well. There is no plan to save the world or a 4D chess game being played. When common American people realize and understand that the political industrial complex of both parties is ripping this country apart, that not one elected leader like me is able to stop Washington's machine from gradually destroying our country. And instead, the reality is that they, common Americans, the people, possess the real power over Washington, then I'll be here by their side to rebuild it. Until then, I'm going back to the people that I love, to live my life to the fullest as I always have, and I look forward to a new path ahead. I'll be resigning from office with my last day being January 5th, 2026, and I look forward to seeing many of you again sometime in the future. May God bless you all, and may God bless America.
Y claro, esto no surge de la nada. En las últimas semanas vimos cómo Trump estuvo atacándola sin descanso, diciendo que ella ya no pertenece a MAGA, que ya nadie la quiere, y utilizando apodos donde básicamente la llama de traidora en público. Ella asegura que estas agresiones le han provocado un aumento enorme de amenazas, de mucho acoso, y todo porque pues el trumpismo decidió convertirla en un objetivo. Bueno, para que puedan entender un poco, ¿no?, el nivel de hostilidad, aquí les voy a mostrar otro clip donde pues Donald Trump se burla de ella por pedir la liberación de los archivos de Epstein y por decir que Trump está mintiendo sobre que todo está más barato en Estados Unidos. Escuchen.
But I talk to you, right? I talk to anybody. We'll see what happens.
Green said her life could be in danger because of the rhetoric.
Her life is in danger. Who's that?
Marjorie Taylor Greene, she says.
Marjorie Trader Green. I don't think her life is in danger. Frankly, I don't think anybody cares about her. Okay, what about you?
Ahora bien, volvamos al video de la renuncia porque en otro fragmento ella arremete contra el liderazgo republicano, diciendo que MAGA Mike Johnson es un líder débil, es alguien inútil y que el partido simplemente no puede lograr nada. También aprovechó para responsabilizar a su bancada del desastre del cierre de gobierno. Vean esto.
However, with almost 1 year into our majority, the legislature has been mostly sidelined. We endured an 8-week shutdown, wrongly, resulting in the House not working for the entire time. And we are entering campaign season, which means all courage leaves and only safe campaign re-election mode is turned on in the House of Representatives. During the longest shutdown in our nation's history, I raged against my own speaker and my own party for refusing to proactively work diligently to pass the plan to save Americans' health care and protect Americans from outrageous, overpriced, and unaffordable health insurance policies. The House should have been in session working every day to fix this disaster. But instead, America was force-fed disgusting political drama once again from both sides of the aisle on television every single day. My bills, which reflect many of President Trump's executive orders, like calling for a new census counting Americans only to draw new districts, making English the official language of the U.S., making it a felony to medically trans a minor, and other bills like eliminating capital gains taxes on the sale of your primary home and eliminating H-1B visas. Just sit. They all sit collecting dust. That's how it is for most members of Congress bills. The speaker never brings them to the floor for a vote. Many common Americans are no longer easily convinced by paid political propaganda spokespersons and consultants on TV and paid shills on social media obediently serving with cult-like conviction to force others to swallow the political party talking points. Because they know how much credit card debt they have, they know how much their bills have gone up over the past 5 years, they actually do their own grocery shopping and know food costs too much, their rent has increasingly gone up and up, they have been outbid by corporate asset managers too many times when they put in an offer to buy a house, they have been laid off after being forced to train their visa holding replacement. The college degree they were told to earn only left them in debt with no big 6-figure salary. They see more homeless people than ever on their own community streets. They can't afford health insurance or practically any insurance, and they just aren't stupid. These are the people I represent and love because that is who all of my family and friends are. Common Americans.
Ahora bien, amigos, para los que me conocen, saben que yo no voy a maquillar la historia. Marjorie Taylor Greene ha pasado años y años acosando a otros, participando en conspiraciones ridículas, lanzando ataques personales con un odio tremendo. O sea, esta señorita no es una santa. Nadie está diciendo, ay, pobrecita de Marjorie. Lo que está pasando es que la misma maquinaria de odio que ella estuvo promoviendo durante tanto tiempo se le fue en contra. Los mismos perfiles MAGA que antes la celebraban, ahora están dedicados a destruirla. Páginas como Women for Trump, figuras como Laura Loomer, que es otra conspiradora, publicando cosas como Marjorie Tree Brown, diciendo que ella se está pudriendo desde dentro. Y claro, Donald Trump también se sumó, ¿no?, a publicaciones donde se burla de ella, diciendo cosas como que nadie se preocupa por esta traidora, que solo sabe llorar y quejarse. Hace unos días estuvimos transmitiendo también y viendo el tema de esta conferencia, ¿no?, de los sobrevivientes del caso de Jeffrey Epstein. Y bueno, si es que no lo vieron, pues Marjorie Taylor Greene estuvo ahí en el Capitolio diciendo que Trump le llama traidora luego de que ella lo defendiera durante 6 años. Escuchen esto.
I was called a traitor by a man that I fought for 6 years for. And I gave him my loyalty for free. I won my first election without his endorsement, beating 8 men in a primary. And I've never owed him anything, but I fought for him for the policies and for America first. And he called me a traitor for standing with these women and refusing to take my name off the discharge petition. Let me tell you what a traitor is. A traitor is an American that serves foreign countries and themselves. A patriot is an American that serves the United States of America and Americans like the women standing behind me. And I want to tell you that this only became possible today because the American people whom we serve as representatives here in Congress demanded that this vote happen, and they put more pressure on every single elected politician in this city than has ever been put on them. And today you are going to see probably a unanimous vote in the House to release the Epstein files, but the real fight will happen after that.
Y claro, Donald Trump incluso tuvo que anunciar públicamente que retiraba su apoyo y todo el respaldo hacia ella. El texto básicamente dice: a pesar de mis logros, Marjorie solo sabe quejarse. Y bueno, bla 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 bla. Y todo empezó cuando le mandé una encuesta donde se sugería que no debía aspirar al Senado. Y bueno, pues poco después fue que Marjorie Taylor Greene apareció en la Cámara justo antes de la votación sobre los archivos de Epstein. Y bueno, lo curioso fue que los republicanos no quisieron darle la palabra. Y bueno, los demócratas sí le dieron el micrófono. Vean esto.
And this was a fight that we should have never had to wage. It should have been the easiest thing for every single member of Congress. It should have been the easiest thing for the Speaker of the House. It should have been the easiest thing for the President of the United States to release all the information, every single file, on behalf of these American women.
Luego de eso, Marjorie Taylor Greene estuvo en un programa que es de Sean Spicer, donde estuvo acusando a Donald Trump y a toda la gente que lo rodea de estar mintiendo sobre la economía, diciendo que las cosas están más baratas, más asequibles, cuando bueno, tampoco hay que ser ilusos, ¿no? Todos sabemos que eso es una cruda mentira. Escuchen.
And so gaslighting the people and trying to tell them that prices have come down is not helping. It's actually infuriating people because people know what they're paying at the grocery store. They know what they're paying for their kids' clothes and school supplies. They know what they're paying for their electricity bills. And so that approach does not work. We need compassion, and show that we care about the American people and show that we are in the trenches with them on what they're going through. That's first and foremost. You don't gaslight them, you don't lecture them, and you don't deny what's happening.
Y para rematar, también estuvo en un podcast, esto fue reciente, donde estuvo reclamando que todos los que votaron por Trump y por J.D. Vance dijeron que querían que se liberara los archivos de Epstein. Entonces, lo hace en tono de que están esperando, ¿no? Vean esto.
Everyone that voted for Trump Vance, everyone was like, release the Epstein files.
Right.
This is not even an argument. It's not even debatable. It's not being a traitor to the president to sign my name on a Thomas Massie discharge petition to release the Epstein files. No. I am staying true to what we've always said. There needs to be transparency.
Me parece increíble hasta qué punto hemos llegado, ¿no? Cómo esta crisis MAGA, este derrumbe republicano, poco a poco ya está demostrando la fractura interna que tienen. Marjorie Taylor Greene es el primer paso, señores. No es la única. No es la única que está digamos, enfadada con su propio partido. Renunció al Congreso, se va, dejará el cargo el próximo 5 de enero de 2026, luego de años siendo una de estas figuras extremistas, de las más extremistas del movimiento MAGA. Y lo más interesante es que fue Donald Trump quien básicamente la empujó hacia afuera por la puerta. Bueno amigos, hay momentos en los que una noticia te revienta en la cara, ¿no? De esas noticias que te obligan a replantearte qué tan profundo puede llegar la podredumbre en el poder. Y este caso de Jeffrey Epstein es uno de esos. Más aún, con los últimos correos que se filtró, que no solo exponen al traficante como tal, a Jeffrey Epstein, sino que también nos revelan cómo los hombres más cercanos al presidente de los Estados Unidos, o sea, a Donald Trump, son los mismos que defendieron a Trump en momentos clave y eran abogados, amigos y protectores del depredador sexual más famoso de la era moderna. Literalmente, señores, todos los hombres del presidente eran todos los hombres del traficante. Quiero que hablemos de cómo este tema de los emails filtrados, los emails liberados, no muestran que Jeffrey Epstein no solo usaba el dinero, las influencias y las amistades políticas para protegerse, sino que como, al parecer, reclutó a figuras legales que, dada la gran coincidencia, ¿no?, terminaron trabajando para Donald Trump. Figuras con acceso directo a la Casa Blanca, al Departamento de Justicia, a los círculos de poder que supuestamente deberían de haberlo investigado. Y en concreto, tengo dos nombres. Hablamos de Ken Starr y de Alan Dershowitz. Dos abogados estrellas, ambos muy conectados al trumpismo. Ambos profundamente involucrados en ayudar a Epstein, en su momento, a evadir la rendición de cuentas. Pero bueno, escuchemos de qué se trata y volvemos para analizar.
This is our original reporting on those newly released emails from the deceased sex trafficker. So we turn to how Epstein tonight, who had used money and politically connected lawyers to duck the worst charges in his original sex crime case, how he continued that playbook. And that was clear, even as the legal walls closed in those final couple years before he was arrested, things looked tough. His legal team did change over time, but he continued to keep up with the two lawyers you see here, Ken Starr and Alan Dershowitz. And they brought more than courtroom experience. They had links to the very top of the government and business elites who run large parts of this country. The new emails shed more light on how Epstein and Starr seemed very close. They met regularly. Starr was at times a professional, where Epstein had been his client, a paid lawyer, but he also was noticeably warm. We see in these emails he signed them hugs and love. A cuddly rhetorical side of Starr that was not his public persona. He was, politicos will remember, the special counsel who went after President Clinton and later represented Trump in his impeachment defense, as you see here. So did Dershowitz. So think about just that before I read you more emails. Epstein managed to tap two lawyers who would later represent the very president who oversaw the DOJ that indicted Epstein. And we have a lot of contemporaneous evidence from that time that Epstein viewed part of his planned defense as having these type of elites who might prevent or corruptly intercede in the legal justice and accountability that he might otherwise face. That's, by the way, one of the reasons so many people in the public domain who haven't read every email get the gist of this and are skeptical of government elites continuing secrecy when they know the rules are not enforced equally. Now, the activities in these emails stretched beyond court and into Epstein's fixation on redeeming his public reputation. That was a theme we reported for you earlier in the week in those Bannon emails, where the Trump vet was openly saying he wanted to help Epstein's media rehab tour. Well, here, in the new emails I'm reading to you, Epstein links with star Trump author Michael Wolff, who had that big hit book he was writing about the Trump presidency. Starr writes, with thanks to Jeffrey, I'm delighted to come into your orbit. Now, then there was a public push where Epstein, who began his relationship with Starr and Dershowitz in that first Florida case, which was the first legal crack in the Epstein facade in 2006. Now, this is relevant to the later emails. They were key to securing a sweetheart plea deal back then. It was resolved a couple of years after the filing, around 2008. And Starr was using connections to be Epstein's, quote, fixer, according to that acclaimed reporting by Miami Herald journalist Julie K. Brown. Remember, it was her expose with her team that actually sparked the new probes of Epstein. So here's a 2018 email from Starr where they are discussing trying to rebut the criticism of that, quote, sweetheart deal. They were preparing an op-ed that defends Epstein and argues critiquing the resolution of a long-ago case involving our former client and now friend, Jeffrey Epstein. They go on to say the critique is profoundly misplaced, and the draft article goes on from there. Now, Starr says former client there. We don't have all the information on when Starr, now deceased, stopped formally representing Epstein or taking his money. It is notable that he said they had become friends. That is certainly not the case of every lawyer who is involved in defending people from heinous accusations or charges. And we can all recognize people have a right to legal defense. But as I will show you tonight, some of this went beyond that courtroom defense. And these are individuals who were clearly attractive to Epstein, not just because they were accredited lawyers, but because of their long political history, the kind of people who could call the top of the DOJ or even higher, maybe pick up a call to the donors and the White House officials and even a president who runs everything. The history of power is what Epstein wanted to exploit.
You ever socialized with Donald Trump in the presence of females under the age of 18?
I'm going to have to assert my 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment rights, sir.
Were there young women in another part of the house giving massages when I wasn't around? I have no idea of that.
If a president does something which he believes will help him get elected in the public interest, that cannot be the kind of quid pro quo.
The president, in the course of those efforts, misused his authority and his power as president. Presidential impeachment was truly a measure of last resort.
When it comes to Trump, all the president's men there were also all the sex traffickers' men. That's who they represented. That's what they did. Now, I want to again emphasize that impeachment was later. Both of those lawyers were retained by President Trump after the Epstein history. But again, their representation of Epstein was public. So make of that choice what you will. And there is still judgment when you're talking about who a president hires. I'd be the first and the last to remind everyone, legal counsel is a right in America, not a choice, not something to be bartered away when someone faces a big enough accusation. Everyone is entitled to that right, Mr. Epstein and Mr. Trump both. But the president's choice there may speak volumes, and we will see if we get the rest of the evidence to understand who he chose. Another 2017 email from a journalist who had worked for the New York Times prior suggests Epstein hired Starr, saying he was fielding questions about why Epstein hired Starr.
Ok, señores, quiero que desmenucemos esto por partes. Para empezar, y primer punto, Epstein no buscaba abogados. Al parecer buscaba poder político. Este tema de los emails ya nos muestran claramente que Epstein se reunía con Ken Starr una y otra vez. Este mismo señor le firmaba correos con lo que muchos conocen como un Hugh and Love, algo así como algo caricaturesco, por así decirlo, viniendo del fiscal que persiguió a Clinton. Y que tanto este hombre, Starr como Dershowitz, tenían conexiones con lo más alto del gobierno. lógicamente hablábamos de Donald Trump. O sea, esto no es una defensa legal, ¿no? Esto es acceso, esto es influencia. Esto es, puedo llamar al fiscal general, a un senador o incluso a un presidente. O sea, solo quiero que se lo imaginen a Jeffrey Epstein en una conversación, poder decir, puedo llamar al fiscal general, puedo llamar a cualquier senador, puedo llamar incluso al presidente. O sea que Jeffrey Epstein sabía perfectamente qué es lo que compraba. Uno de los puntos que a mi parecer son de los más perturbadores de este archivo es cómo veía estas figuras, ¿no? Como escudos políticos, porque literalmente él los seleccionó porque eran los tipos que podían llamar a los que mandan. Ejemplo, en el Departamento de Justicia o en la Casa Blanca. Y sucede que los mismos abogados terminan representando a quién. Correcto, a Donald Trump. ¿Dónde? Les doy ejemplos. En su impeachment, en múltiples defensas, en momentos críticos, tanto para su primer mandato como para este segundo mandato. Yo les pregunto, ¿de verdad tenemos que creer que esto es una casualidad? Jeffrey Epstein estaba obsesionado con acercarse al poder, pero no cualquier poder, al poder trumpista, a ese ecosistema donde la influencia mediática, donde la política podían salvarlo. Incluso se menciona cómo es que Epstein hablaba con Starr sobre el estado del caso Mueller, por si lo recuerdan, sobre si Donald Trump estaba en problemas o no. A ver, ¿por qué un traficante discute eso con un abogado conectado a Trump? Porque los correos muestran varias discusiones sobre cómo debían escribir un artículo defendiendo a Epstein para lavar la imagen pública, cómo podían usar conexiones para presionar al Departamento de Justicia, cómo podían manipular a medios, incluso me atrevo a decir medios muy grandes, para ocultar su historial de abuso. Amigos, hablamos de una operación de propaganda, de influencia y de presión política. Seguramente alguien me podría decir, bueno, pues hasta los criminales merecen una defensa legal. Y bueno, el derecho a un abogado es algo fundamental. Pero aquí no estamos hablando del abogado de oficio ni de defensa procesal común. Hablamos de gente que tiene contactos al más alto nivel, negociando influencia política, presionando a instituciones como el Departamento de Justicia. Me atrevo a decir que hasta diseñando campañas mediáticas. O sea que este tema de los archivos de Epstein no solo van a revelar la vida de este criminal y sus conexiones. Yo quiero verlo como que nos van a revelar cómo es que funciona la élite cuando se protege a sí misma. Nos van a revelar cómo los hombres del presidente también eran los hombres del traficante. Cómo es que se mueve, ¿no?, en círculos que jamás deberían de cruzarse, el poder. Y que siempre terminan unidos cuando se trata de proteger a uno de los suyos. Pero bueno, amigos, ¿qué opinan ustedes sobre todo esto? ¿Realmente creen que todo esto, para muchos, terminó con la muerte de Epstein? ¿Será que estamos tan solo viendo la punta del iceberg? Los leo en los comentarios. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme en este video. Recuerden, como siempre, déjame tu like, comparte el contenido y suscríbete al canal. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.